Hey, what's up guys, Rev here. Today's another one of those dark videos covering the disgusting acts of another popular figure on the internet. It's sad to say, but it seems like I make one of these videos every single week, where a content creator uses their platform and status to take advantage of people, including children. But just because this is one of many recent examples, it doesn't make it any less important to cover, or the damage they caused any less harmful to the people involved. Today we're talking about the voice actor Elliot Gindi, most known for voicing the character Tighnari from Genshin Impact. Earlier this week, a former mod of Elliot released a Google Doc containing a list of victim statements cataloging a whole host of predatory behavior he has been engaging in over the past few years. And we'll break down all of this soon enough, but after reading the Google Doc, his behavior is the textbook definition of grooming, using his fame and position of trust to manipulate his fans, and including underage ones, into satisfying his sexual urges. And when confronted with the possibility of his victims going public with their stories, this 24-year-old man attempted to blackmail them and threatened to game end himself if they moved forward. Unsurprisingly, these developments have rocked not only the Genshin Impact community and the internet as a whole, but the Western voice acting industry, who have been tweeting their reactions to this situation. And keep in mind that Elliot has already confirmed that the screenshots in the related Google Doc are accurate in his pathetically bad apology post. So as you can see, lots of ground to cover today, so let's look at the disturbing allegations lodged against Elliot Gindi. So I want to begin my coverage of the Google Doc by starting with the final portion they provided. It details what they consider some of his questionable practices, but I think this section gives some solid insight as to the type of person we're dealing with. Concerned that Elliot was not addressing an obsessed fan from his Discord server, this user asked Elliot about DMs he shared with a fan asking, "Did you respond?" Because honestly, you should probably stop DMing with fans because that's part of how parasocial attachments form. You're privately talking to them, they think you're their friend or more. Where Elliot responded with, "Oh, I do my best to cut it short and stuff. I haven't DM'd any fans in a long time. I saw the writing on the wall." So this is probably a bit of an unnecessary detour, but something about calling people your fans always irks me a bit. I understand that many of you guys are fans of my channel, for example, but I would never call you my fans. I would call you something like my viewers, members of my community, or just regular people, because I don't like creating the impression that I'm above you guys in any sort of way. I like to think we're on a similar plane. I make videos on YouTube. No matter my success, I feel like my value is still less than the guy stocking shelves at Walmart. After all, whether it's me or someone like Elliot, we're not Kanye or anything, like please. Addressing everyone who interact with you as your fans is weird, but nonetheless. This user goes on to say, closing DMs to non-friends would solve the issue, which is entirely correct by the way, but Elliot counters with, "Yeah, I just never wanted to be that closed off. I use Discord for things where I'm not King Elliot's. And it was nice to have an open channel." Where this user responds, "But it causes issues. You're not just some guy anymore, you're a public figure." So the irony of this situation is that King Elliot knew full well that he was a public figure. He liked to play it down as being the grounded, wholesome Chungus good guy VA who never wanted to let his fans down, but in reality, his primary motive was to use his status to get what he wanted out of people, including children. Now, before we read the various victim statements, I want you to see some of Elliot's initial responses to the possibility that they would go public with their stories, claiming that the victims have as much to lose as him and would never dare to spread this information, and that he was kind of smart, leaving no paper trail, no real evidence, and even mocking the victims, claiming they're bipolar and crazy. This tactic of shaming his victims and using their trauma against them is a constant theme throughout the victim statements, something we're going to look at now. So the first account involves a 14-year-old, someone that Elliot was extremely sexual with. In their statement that was shared on both Twitter and in the Google Doc, this user describes how they met Elliot through Instagram, wanting to show their Tighnari fan art and polls, claiming that they were surprised and flattered when he did respond to them, and then they would talk about Genshin and their personal lives as well. This child would later confide in Elliot about how the character he voiced, Tighnari, was a comfort character for them because they were sexually assaulted a few months prior, where apparently he began to get more personal with his questions and then things quickly turned sexual. In case it wasn't already gross, he would consistently pry for more details about the assaults this victim experienced and asked about their fantasies and continued prying even after they shared with him that they were ace or asexual. Well, that was not the only thing they shared, because after a very long string of sexual messages, the victim shared that they were only 14 years old, where Elliot had a complete meltdown telling this child that they can't tell anyone about this whole situation and that they wanted to die for what they did. It's funny, but not so funny, that Elliot claims to always ask for the age of people he talks with, but he never actually seems to do that or care about this information when he's presented with it, unless he knows he's going to get in trouble. So we're going to move on to the next victim, and for context, this was yet another fan of his work and someone who was put into sexual situations by Elliot when they were still underage. So these screenshots are pretty important. You have a conversation the mod had with the victim where they claim they were still underage when they were talking with Elliot, and on the right, you have a conversation where the victim stated that they were 17 to an unfazed Elliot. I know some people are going to look at this and point out the fact that they were close to 18 at the time, and I don't want to get too bogged down in that debate. I find this story most interesting because Elliot used his fame and the trauma of his victim to lead them into sexual situations. So again, I'm summarizing for the purposes of this video, but there's a lot this victim said about Elliot, who was instructed by Elliot to delete things, including some of their messages on Instagram, for example, in addition to Elliot wiping all of his private Discord servers. But keep in mind, Elliot already admitted guilt to all these things in his apology. From what I can gather, the victim in this case is transgender, and very shortly after meeting Elliot, over the coming months, he was already telling them what surgeries they should or shouldn't have, referred to the victim with feminine pronouns and attempted to feminize them despite the person asking them continuously to stop. And like everything else, Elliot's interest or feigned interest in any of these things was for his own sexual gratification. He had plenty of controlling behaviors where he would refer to them as his current favorites, got their physical address, and made them form a contract with him where they couldn't be with guys, but he encouraged the child to be sexual with girls, including the victim's friends, all for his own gratification, of course. And at various points, the victim shared with Elliot that they had mental illnesses, including BPD and PTSD from their own sexual trauma. Almost every single time these things were brought up, Elliot would immediately turn the conversation into something sexual, or would have the victim stripped naked on cam, for example, or cam himself naked to the victim, all done with the victim claiming that they were still underage at those times. Like, imagine, it's like he's sitting there like, oh, that's horrible, you have PTSD from sexual trauma? Okay, yeah, take your clothes off. Like, I'm not trying to make light of it, but that's how flippant this guy's attitude was towards his victims. And the situation would be much like the others, where once the victim threatened to cut him off or bring their story to others, Elliot would make himself the victim and threaten to game end himself if anything happened, something reflected by both the victim's accounts as well as his breakdown on his own Discord server and conversations with his mods that you can pause and read for yourself. Obviously, he was very panicked by these situations because he knew he was in the wrong and was trying to throw a pity party and delete as much evidence as he could in an attempt to sweep all of this under the rug, where of course we all know how this story would end, and this viral Google Doc would come out to the shock and disappointment of millions, including his co-workers from Genshin Impact and fellow members of the industry who came out to disavow his actions and express their support for the victims involved. Now, I don't want to get bogged down on this. You can read the statements here. There was some drama amongst the voice actors who just always have to make these things about themselves, where they were bringing up some people not having the right to speak on this drama where others could. It was a mess, and I'm not paying any attention to it. I just wanted to make that known. And of course, what would one of these scandals be without a Logan Paul-styled apology, Responding to the allegations, Elliot would drop this stinker on Twitter, sharing a link to a twit-longer apology where he essentially admits to the chat logs and most of the allegations as a result, only disputing misgendering some of them and waiting for one of them to turn 18 before he did something sexual. Yeah, I mean, he's right. He didn't wait. He was being sexual with them before they were 18. And his reaction to this is so embarrassing. Again, I'm not trying to make light of all this stuff. I get these are dark subjects and there's victims here, but look at his Twitter. Literally going dark mode like a teenage boy that's going through a breakup and is, trying to act all emo and sad. And this little quote in his bio, "I never stop trying." What, to groom teenagers? I don't understand, man. This whole thing is absolutely embarrassing. And speaking of embarrassing, what would this whole controversy be involving someone from Genshin Impact where lolly stuff is brought up? Because, someone is outed as a predator who is targeting teenagers and other underage people. And of course, Twitter goes, "Yes, I see that. But what about the drawings?" Absolutely ridiculous, and I'm not going into that any further, and anyone who does that is completely out of touch. But now we're going to conclude this video. It's obviously a very dark and disappointing situation. Genshin and MiHoYo have spoken out to different sources, and they're saying that they're looking into the situation, and it's unclear of what they're going to do next. I would strongly guess they are letting him go and replacing him as the voice of Tighnari, but that's not confirmed yet, so that's something to be aware of. And really, like I said in the beginning of this video, this is the textbook definition of grooming, where Elliot took advantage of his status as someone that people looked up to and his status as a celebrity to put teenagers and his fans into situations where he could manipulate them into doing sexual things for his own gratification. It's disgusting, and I hope this guy never sees another voice acting role again, let alone I hope he sees some sort of a legal consequence for this. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it really should. But that's going to do it for this video. A link to the Google Doc will be in the description. There's more stories, more evidence, and I was very quick with summarizing these things. So if you want the full story, go read the Google Doc. But that's it. Share your thoughts about all this in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.